Erev Torah Otai. It says something very interesting in the Gemara Sanhedrin, Lamed Gimel. There's a discussion over there about a Dayan. Dayan is somebody who judges, Two people come, one is saying this, one is saying that, who's right, who's wrong, he has to judge. That's one of the things that they do. So, what happens is like this, what about if the Dayan made a mistake? Ta'ud. Right? So, what happens over there, how does this get resolved? This thing, right? Made a mistake, what can you do? Right? We're all flesh and blood, we all make mistakes. What can we do? Made a mistake, So says the Gemara, depends on what mistake it was, If it was a mistake, b'davar Mishna, then what happens is that the din is invalid. So they have to judge again.
What is the davar Mishna?
I'm going to explain that. Right, davar Mishna. It has to be done again, the din. Because the din was wrong, he made a mistake. It's a total mistake. So if he took money from him, and he gave money to him, right, this is not valid. The money has to be returned. It's not a valid din. It was done against the Mishnah. But says the Gemara, what about if it was shikul dat? You know what that means? Judgment, The rabbi used his judgment, and it was a mistake. His judgment was a mistake. It wasn't davar Mishnah. Right? So, what do you do then? So then, you know what the rule is? If he made a mistake of davar judgment, it says in the Gemara that the Dayan has to pay, this person that he took his money. He has to pay him from his own money. Because after all, you stole this guy's money. You took his money, and you gave it to this guy, right? You tell them, you're guilty, you're innocent, you took his money. So now, okay, you made a mistake, huh? You didn't know what you were doing? So okay, take your wallet out and pay him. You took his money. You gotta pay. The Dayan has to pay. This is the rule. Can you imagine? So now the question is like this, right? Like Rabbi Yonatan asking over here. He's asking a good question. What does it mean, davar Mishnah? He made a mistake, davar Mishnah. So it means like this, that it's written in the Mishnah, this halakha, and he didn't remember it. He forgot it. He forgot the Mishnah, and he ruled against the Mishnah. This is something which is very negligent, What, you're a Dayan, and you forgot something which is written in the Mishnah, you did against the Mishnah, so this is a total mistake, it's totally invalid, batel, the whole din is batel, so it has to be judged again. You're going against the Torah, what you said. It's against the Torah. That's what it means, davar Mishnah. Now comes, right, the interesting thing. In the Gemara, right, over there, comes one Rabbi, his name is Ravina, right? And he asked Rav Ashi a question. So he says, what? When you're talking about davar b'Mishnah, something in the Mishnah, does that also include the braitot, that are in the Talmud? The braitot. What's the difference between Mishnah and Braita? What's the difference?
Braita didn't go to Torah, to Mishnah. It's like outside.
Yeah, he's right what he's saying. But I'm going to explain.
Mishnah that didn't go in.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're both right. Okay, but I just want to explain a little bit more, right? What does this mean? That the Mishnayot were written by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He was the one who did the Mishnayot, right? He wrote everything down, right? What he did was, he wrote whatever he thought was the halakha, according to his opinion, according to his judgment, right? But then, there are things, that got left out from this, because he didn't feel that this was the proper thing to put in there. So there were some other chachamim, Rabbi Yoshaya, Rabbi Chia, that made braitot, a book of braitot, that they were not included in the Mishnah. This is called braita. The word baraita in Aramaic, it means outside, bechutz, it's outside, it's not inside the Mishnah. That's what it means, baraita. Right?
That's what didn't get inside.
Right, exactly, that's it. So, now here's the thing, right? So, comes Ravina and asks Rav Ashi. He asks him a question, he says, when we say, right, he made a mistake in the Mishnah, does that also include the braita? If he made a mistake, something which is written in the braita also? Right? So Rav Ashi answers him, of course, what are you talking about? But braita is also halakha. So if he didn't know the braita, also this din is no good, it's invalid. Pasul. Right? Batel. Okay, good. Now it says Ravina asks him another question. Here we go, right? Going step by step. Then he asks him another question. He says, does that also include what was said by Rav and Shmuel? right? The Emoraim, after the Braita, after the Mishnah. Rav and Shmuel, they came after. By the way, who was Rav? Who was Shmuel? They were both Talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. They were the first generation of Emoraim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the last generation of the Tanaim. This is Rav and Shmuel. So he asked him, does that also include what was said by Rav and Shmuel also? That's called Davar Mishnah? Right? So he answers him, yes, it does. It does. Whatever they said, it's also the same thing. It's Mishnah. Boom. Right? Now, Ravina asked him one more question. Right? One more. One more for the road, right? So he asked him, he says, what about what we say, you and me, right? Ravina and Rav Asher, right? What about that? Is that a part also Mishnah? What we paskin in the halakha? That's what he asked him. So Ravina answers him, Rav Asher answers him like this. He says, La katle kane be'agma anan. This is Aramaic, So I'll explain to you what this means, right? What does this mean? He tells them, well, what do you think? We're like, we're farmers in the field, but we're also rabbis. What do you think? Well, we're not rabbis? Only they were rabbis, we're not rabbis? That's what he tells them. He says, for sure, also what we say. Who was Rav Asher and Ravina, right? They were the ones who finished the Talmud. They were the ones who wrote the Talmud. The final word in the Talmud was by them. Bam. Right? Rav Asher was the Gdol Ador in that time. He was a great rabbi of the generation. Rav Asher. So, what do we learn from here? Right? It's a very important concept, But before we get to this, I want to tell you one more thing. Now, the other side, right? We said, what about if the Dayan made a mistake in Shikul Dat, in his judgment? So there, the Dayan has to pay from his own pocket. He's got to pay, the guy, they took his money. You made a mistake, you pay, I'm sorry, take you, write a check, Give him the money. You made a mistake, So, Gemara asks, right, what is called judgment? What does that mean? What judgment talking, right? What is that? Right? So he tells him like this, he answers him. You know what judgment means? There's a machloket between two chachamim in the generation, like Rav and Shmuel, right? Machloket. Rav says this, Shmuel says this, right? And the halacha wasn't paskin in the Gemara. They didn't say what's halacha. They didn't have halacha in the Gemara. There are things like this, right? Where they didn't paskin the halacha. So in a case like that, where there's a machloket in between two chachamim, right? And they didn't paskin the halacha, which one is the halacha? If you make a mistake like that, it's called, why is that a mistake? You know why? Because the majority of the Dayanim, the Rov, right, are saying like Rav, and you did like the minority, like Shmuel, it's a minority opinion. You did like Shmuel, so that's called Shikul Dat. You made a mistake in judgment, error in judgment. So the Dayan over there has to pay, right? So now, let me just tell you what we learned from this, for us. We're not in Dayanim, we're in Beddin, we're just regular Jews, right? We're just regular guys. So what does it teach us? It teaches you something very, very important, that every generation, the Gedolim, the big Chachamim, who say, Halakha, who say Paskin Halakha, it's like Mishnah, it's the same thing, it's Mishnah, it's Davar Mishnah, that's what it is, Every generation has Gedolim. We had, in this generation, we had Gedolim. We had Maran, Rav Ovadia, my rabbi. We had Rav Eliashiv, another big Chacham. There was several big Chachamim, that were in this generation. Big Dayanim, big Chachamim. What they say also is Mishnah. So you have to understand that, what does that mean? You can't just say, I don't agree with that, But are you sure you're big enough to disagree with somebody like this, Do you know enough Torah to disagree with him? If you don't, you're not on that level, So there's no way to disagree with the Gedolim like this, You have to go like them. But another thing, that we learn from here, a very important thing, is that when there's a machloket between the chachamim, one rabbi says like this, one rabbi says like that. So what do you do in a case like that, So the truth is, according to what we just said, the truth is the best way to handle it is to go like the majority, If the Rov Chachamim are going one way, go like this way. If Rov Chachamim are going this way, go this way, That's the way to do it. That's the proper way to do it.
If my rabbi,
Yeah.
Shmuel, for example.
Right.
Rabbi says Shmuel.
Yes,
Rabbi.
Rav, yeah.
So I'm studying in his school, so his opinion matter for me. Should I be listening to the rabbi?
He's right what he's saying. That's a very good question, right? You understand this question? In other words, if you are Talmid of this Chacham, And you're not telling me that Chacham. So the truth is, the Talmidim should follow their Rebbe. That's the way it is. You know what I mean? That's they have to follow your Rabbi.
He's not right, he's right.
But if you already became, yourself a Chacham, you're already Chacham yourself. So there, you can already start to look at it yourself, on your own decision. In other words, you say, well, the majority goes like this, and this is a minority opinion. You can already start to judge these things yourself. And also, if he became a real big Chacham, Gida Lehora, right? He became also Posek himself, Dayan. So he can judge himself also, that's another thing, right? Yeah.
The other day you were talking about that person cannot say Divrei Torah if he didn't hear from his
Right. You remember that, yeah.
Continuation to this, how I can have my different opinion if I study with Shmuel and by your saying I cannot have my own opinion.
He's saying good, very, very good question. You know what the answer is to your question? The answer is that when you start out, as a Talmid, you should just listen to your rabbi and do what he says. Don't play games,
Okay, I'm
what I mean?
past that level.
Well, once you became already Gadol yourself, now you're a big boy. We cannot tell you what to do anymore. You're Gadol. Right? Now you can do your own thing. But you're also one of the Gedolim. I'll tell you a story about this and you'll understand, right, what I mean. They say, right, that Rabbi Yochanan, Resh Lakish, this was also two big Chachamim of the generation, right? This was before Rav Asher, because they wrote the Talmud Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan wrote the Yerushalmi, and Rav Asher did the Talmud Bavli. This was before, Yerushalmi was before. So what happened was that, right, what happened? Resh Lakish was Baal Tshuva, he was bandit, right, gangster, he was gangster. Yeah. So what happened? Rabbi Yochanan, brought him to do Teshuvah, and he taught him Torah, and then what happened was that Resh Lakish also became Gadol. He became Gadol, with big shoulders, just like Rabbi Yochanan. Same. You understand? Oh, so then, what happened? There was one time that Resh Lakish, opened the bed din already, He had his own bed din. Can you imagine? Even though Rabbi Yochanan was alive. He was alive at that time. So what happened was he opened the bed din, and some lady came to the bed din, and Resh Lakish judged, the case. Like this, he said, ba, 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 right? Da, 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 da. So this lady, didn't like the way he decided the case, Resh Lakish. Right? So, what she decided to do? Go to the other side, right? Let's go to Rabbi Yochanan, Maybe he can reverse it, do something, You play these games, right? People like to play games like this, So she went to Rabbi Yochanan, and she told Rabbi Yochanan, Resh Lakish, I went to his bed din, and this is how he judged me, he says. Look what he did to me, So Rabbi Yochanan asked her, what did he say? What did he say? So he said like this and this and this and this and this. So Rabbi Yochanan, thought about it for a second. He says, what can I do? He says, I can't do nothing. He says, this guy is like as big as me. He's the same as me. I can't do nothing about it. What am I gonna do? In other words, he saw that he's already big enough, to make his own decisions. So this was the whole thing. That even though Resh Lakish was a Talmid, and Rabbi Yochanan was the Rebbe, right? But because Resh Lakish became also Gadol, he was arguing with Rabbi Yochanan day and night. Day and night they were arguing. Day and night, every day. Boom, 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 boom. Machloket every time. Like this, right? So you see from there, the truth is, right, that once a Talmid becomes Gadol, he's already Gadol himself. That's something else. We're not talking about that, right? But that takes a lot of limud, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, becomes Gadol. It's something else, right? We're not talking about that.
So that's what you just said. Is Talmud allowed to argue with Chacham?
If you get to that level, yes, of course. But that's the thing,
But still is,
Right. That's what the Gemara says. Gemara says, if there's machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Because he's the Rebbe. But there are 3 cases, and we go like Resh Lakish. Why is that? Why? Because he was right in those cases. Sometimes, the Talmid is right. What can you do, right? Not always the Rebbe is right. Sometimes the Talmid is right. ברוך ה' לעולם, אמן אמן. רבי חנינא בן השומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות צועל, לפיכך הכיר בא להם צום על צום שמנו נחפש למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.